between the two Irelands, dividing the island north and south. Beyond the mountains of the Mourne is the independent Irish Republic. This side is Northern Ireland, a part of Britain, Ulster. No watchtowers here, no minefields, no barbed wire fences, just an occasional British patrol and tension. For 6 weeks, there has been a ceasefire between the British Army and the Irish Republican Army, the IRA. Catholics and soldiers have stopped shooting each other, but not Protestants and Catholics. The causes of this conflict remain the same. A no man's land still separates the antagonists, and the army still patrols it.
The plain fact is that there is a form of civil war here now, and if it weren't for the British Army, there would be civil war on a scale that would be 17th century in tone and not 20th century.
There is certainly no basis in the claim that the IRA are engineering a civil war. It just isn't on. As I would qualify that by saying that if a civil war is thrust upon us, we will resist, we will fight, and we will win.
Let's get to the real heart of this matter. And the real heart of this matter is, will we maintain the Union? Will we stand for what our fathers stood for? Or will we, for the price of a patched-up peace, submit ourselves to what ultimately will be a Trojan horse that will destroy the people of Northern Ireland?
No compromise, no surrender. The slogans of yesterday still relevant today. And the price of this intransigence, 1,200 violent deaths, and the piecemeal destruction of the towns and cities of Northern Ireland. A permanent truce between the IRA and the British Army will help, but it won't end the troubles. The true battle is between Protestants and Catholics.
If we are getting attacked, the best defense is attack.
The best form of defense is attack.
Today's truce between the soldiers and the IRA is not the first. After every previous truce, the violence has simply escalated. Maybe peace will come to Northern Ireland with a whimper, not a bang. But the truce may also be the prelude to the biggest bang of all, if both sides can find no common ground. What we propose to do tonight is look at two peoples who have learned to live with violence. Two peoples in a state of siege.
This is a CBS News special. A Tale of Two Irelands with CBS News correspondent John Lawrence. A Tale of Two Irelands with CBS News correspondent John Lawrence continues.
The island of Ireland is divided in two parts. The Republic of Ireland in the south. 3 million people, 94% Catholic. Quiet, except on the few occasions when the violence spills over from the north. Northern Ireland, or Ulster, part of Great Britain. 1.5 million people. 2/3 Protestant, 1/3 Catholic. The major trouble center is the capital of Northern Ireland, Belfast. A city 5 years in the shadow of the gun, where shoppers and soldiers have learned to coexist, where downtown streets are cleared of traffic, not for the convenience of pedestrians, but for their safety. There were more than 3,000 shootings and 3,500 bombing incidents in Northern Ireland last year alone. The turnstiles and barriers keep the car bombers away, but though the searchers deter gunmen and arsonists, they can't look everywhere. Smuggle in a detonator, buy a little fertilizer, sugar, or even grated cheese at the supermarket, add a few chemicals from the drugstore, and one of these shoppers could become a terrorist. In Belfast, there is no perfect sanctuary. The shopper still has to get home safely. Stop violence, the bus slogan says, and when suspicious, dial 999. The country is gone mad, wrote Sean O'Casey in the 1920s. Petrol is their holy water. Their mass is a burning building. British patrols are heaviest in working-class neighborhoods. That's still where the shooting and burning start. The Irish Republican Army, the clandestine IRA, fighting to unite all Ireland, sees the soldiers as an army of occupation, the enemy. Catholic neighborhoods, like the Clonard, have long been hostile territory to the patrols, and the Protestants are standing by to fight it out if the army backs down. In Northern Ireland, the Protestants have the jobs, and they'd kill Catholics to keep it that way. As for a united Ireland, never.
Hey?
So the two communities move further apart. The Catholics preoccupied with the army, the Protestants preoccupied with the Catholics. And something strange is happening. A modern industrial society is traveling in reverse, breaking down not just into territories, but into tribes. The Catholic Ardoyne, the Protestant Shankill, the Catholic Falls, Protestant Sandy Row, Catholic Clonard, and Protestant Woodvale. Each tribal compound shielded from its neighbor by a miniature Berlin Wall. But whereas the Berlin Wall separates people against their will, the Belfast Peace Line separates them by choice. The tribes don't want to meet. And behind the walls, only the strong are respected, and only the strong survive. Recently, we crossed into two tribal compounds in Belfast, the Woodvale and the Clonard, to see just how strong the tribes are. 7:30 in the morning. Most of Protestant Woodvale is already at work, but one man in the neighborhood is a little behind schedule. 31-year-old Sammy McCracken is a one-time amateur boxer, now a married man with 2 children, who has never lived anywhere else but the Woodvale. He and his friends would die to keep Ulster British. By day, Sammy works as an electrician at a building site 20 miles outside Belfast. His 60 workmates are all Protestant. No Catholic would bother to apply or even want to. Working a 6 or 7 day week, Sammy earns $200. His subsidized housing costs him $25 a month rent. He's secure. All of which begins to explain why Sammy McCracken at home is no ordinary electrician. In the Woodvale, meet Colonel McCracken, tribal chief, commander of the WDA, the Woodvale Defense Association. The hoods are to prevent identification by the IRA. The WDA is a semi-legal paramilitary organization formed to defend the Woodvale. But it's more than that. It's an enormous bloc association with muscle. Sammy commands 300 officers and men, runs 3 social clubs, and maintains an all-hours Citizens Advice Bureau at home. A stone's throw from the Woodvale, across the peace line, is the Catholic Clonard. Many of the men here are IRA, either in the internment camps or on the run. So the tribe is held together by the women and whoever is left on the streets. At midday, 21-year-old Des Reynolds walks to the hospital to visit his wife, who's expecting their first child. The streets are almost empty. Army patrols are expected, and the wanderer invites suspicion. Des and his Clonard neighbors see themselves as Irish, not British. The IRA can recruit here, organize operations, and seek sanctuary. As for Des, the British Army knows him well. He is classified as fringe IRA. The reason he's been photographed? Des has just spent 2 years in the Longkesh internment camp for attempting to blow up the Europa Hotel and sniping at British soldiers. He was detained without trial and denies the accusations. During the daytime, Des usually sits around his in-laws' home watching television, listening to the news, and waiting for the British Army to leave Northern Ireland. He is confident that when that happens, the Catholic and Protestant working classes will unite.
During the violence, 2 buildings outside the main...
We talked separately to Sammy and Des to find out whether or not the two adversaries have anything in common.
What does Britain mean to you?
Means a whole lot. Means security for my family. And I won't let anybody take that away from me.
Do you have a job?
I haven't got a job at the minute.
Have you ever had a job?
Not since I left school. I worked for about 2 or 3 months since I left school.
Have you got a home?
I haven't even got a home.
Do you feel safe walking the streets of Belfast?
No. You never know the minute somebody's going to step out, put a gun to your head. Professional IRA know me. I know they can get me anytime. So that's why I don't feel safe.
Why do you keep the shotgun in the corner?
That's for hunting rabbits.
Do you see this as a sectarian conflict? A religious war?
I have nothing against any Catholics. It's against the republicanism, trying to force their will upon us. In other words, they're going to take away my standard of living and everything else.
Well, religion plays a big part in my life and all the people's lives. A great lot of people are dying for their faith. Because they're Catholics, they're being shot. And possibly because they're Protestants, they're being shot.
Let us pray for the dead. Pray especially for the dead members of your own families, relatives, friends, all those who have died as a result of violence.
The churches in Ireland have condemned the extremists, but not to the extent of losing the tribal allegiance of their congregations. Church leaders have locked in their flocks for safety, but locked out change. Separate churches, separate schools, separate values, always emphasizing differences, not similarities.
I think what is needed is more dialogue among the Protestant Catholic people. The only difference between the two of us is we have two different ideals. The Protestant man wants to keep a 6-county Ulster, and I want to keep a 32-county Irish Republic. Our children are probably, they don't actually know the difference between Protestants, but they know they're bad, they're wrong, they attack your area. The way I would like to see them growing up is that their enemy will be the British.
Is there an absence of political leadership?
I don't really think the politicians have been any good or helped the people.
Who really governs Northern Ireland today?
No one, as far as I can see.
No one rules Northern Ireland in the present day.
In a political vacuum, the substitute for leadership is rhetoric.
But it is quite clear that the strategy of the Irish Republic's government is the strategy of communism in a guerrilla situation. Take the Vietnam situation. North Vietnam, first of all, said there should be no border. The country should be one. And of course they should rule it. The South have said the very same thing. The 1937 Constitution claims that they are the governors of this part of Ireland. We would like to tell them they'll never be the governors of this part of Ireland.
How would you describe the IRA?
Most people describe them as scum, you know. They're just people I don't like. I hate them. Fight them till I die. The aims of the IRA was discovered in a house up the Malone Road, which they were using for cover. The documents were seized and they were put over the television, and you've all seen what their objective was, which was to attack the Protestant working class areas.
Paramilitary units like the Woodvale Defense Association have a vested interest in continuing the fighting. They enjoy their power. In a strange way, the war has transformed what was just another urban slum into a community. But it's fear that holds it together.
On this major road here, we will set up the evacuation area for the women and children if the trouble does break out. Also, because of the two sides we'll have to cope for, we're going to have the first aid post set up somewhere on the major road here as well, so it's between the two, so you don't have so far to travel with any wounded. As you all know, the way we're fighting at the moment, if and when this trouble breaks out, we hope that all weapons are available. We're hoping for anyway. So you do know in guerrilla warfare how to set your men up in positions, etc., and what way to use the particular weapons that you have got. I would say our main area, but as you know, is the chapel grounds here. Because, as you know, in the last lot of years, this is where all the shooting and that there has come from. They come in from the Ardoyne, in through the chapel grounds, and then they're at a high area here, and they can fire right into our district.
If we are getting attacked, the best defence is attack.
If, for example, your neighbors across the peace line, the Woodvale Defence Association, attacked, would you fight?
Yeah, I personally would fight.
Aren't you, in fact, a kind of sheriff?
Sheriff? Never thought of myself as a sheriff.
What's the toughest punishment you've had to hand out?
Bit of a bashing about, you know. I've never shot anyone.
Have you ever been tortured?
I was tortured by the British Army. They pulled my hair, stuck a knife in my leg, burnt my legs, things like that.
Do you blame the soldiers for torturing you?
No.
It's been said that in Ireland, the pubs know a lot, almost as much as the churches. Sammy's whispered conversations with a colleague might be about military tactics, a bar debt, or a truant schoolboy. Here, the secret is safe. This is a private working man's club. Catholics not welcome. There is security, and it's Sammy's job to maintain it. We asked Sammy's neighbors what kind of man he is. Tough, they said, but fair and honest. He is Woodvale's strongest. So, when he sings, everybody listens. Sammy McCracken never seized power. He was elected by a majority of the Woodvale men. But it would take a strong pair of fists, a jail sentence, or an IRA bullet to unseat him now. Besides, Sammy does reflect his community's need for identity. The Woodvale Protestants live in Ireland, but they don't feel Irish. Their patriotism embarrasses the English. Their conservatism embarrasses the politicians. Now, the community, backed by its own defense association and organizations like it all over Belfast, is important.
Sammy McCracken, put your hands together for both Sammy, never home.
It's a good feeling. But for the outsider, there's hate here.
Oh, I wish I was in a land of cotton. Oh, they were not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away. Dixieland.
The WDA is only the tip of the Protestant iceberg. There are 15,000 Protestants in similar organizations throughout Ulster. If Ireland was united without their support, these men would be to Ireland what the IRA is to Britain, a guerrilla army. Dixie may be the song of a lost cause in America, but there's a lot of fight left in these Protestants. The Battle Hymn of the Republic is also a local favorite. It seems clear that the Woodvale tribe would rather fight than let Ulster go Irish, even though Sammy admits that civil war would solve nothing. There would be no winners, he says, just losers. In the strike of May 1974, the Protestants brought down the Northern Ireland government and did more political damage in 2 weeks than IRA terrorism had done in nearly 5 years. They know they have political power. Their military power would be tested by a withdrawal of the British Army. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe. Across the peace line, the Clonard Catholics march to a different drummer.
We are the
We are the IRA Provisionals, they sing. We are the Provos, and we're proud. This is the Pound Loney Social Club. Here, Des and his friends keep to themselves. The Clonard community, unlike its Woodvale counterpart, is always under siege. Outside, an army patrol, faces blackened, watches the club through infrared night sights. Inside, the Catholics, though they make no attempt to hide their tribal sympathies, are wary of informers, aware of the dangers of guilt by association. It's not that Des, just out of the internment camp, isn't popular. It's that to be seen with him is to invite suspicion. No European nation has had its nationalism frustrated so long as Ireland. For centuries, patriotism was all the Irish could have, generations of devotion to Irish nationhood. It isn't going to disappear in the North just because it's currently impractical. An Irish ballad tells why. Come, all you young rebels, and list while I sing. For the love of one's country is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of the patriot game.
Come, all you young rebels, and list while I sing. For the love of one's country is a beautiful thing. It vanishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of the patriot game. My name is O'Hanlon. My age is...
At Republican parades and funerals, the IRA men can't show their faces, so the young self-consciously take their place. As one onlooker put it, to hell with the future, long live the past. May God in his mercy look down on Belfast.
Cruel England's to blame. And that's why
both sides are still far apart, the men that God made mad, for all their wars are merry, and all their songs are sad.
it makes us all part of the patriot game.
No people, wrote the Irish poet Yeats, hate as we do, in whom the past is always alive. The Irish past, more than 1,000 years of foreign invasions and foreign rule, of tragedy and defeat. The English have been fighting the Irish since the 12th century, but it was not until 400 years later, when England became a Protestant kingdom, that the English crown determined to bring the Catholic Irish to heel once and for all. Queen Elizabeth, King James I, and then Cromwell recognized that the only way to control Ireland was to colonize it, with thousands of Protestants brought from Scotland. The battle lines were drawn. Protestants loyal to the crown, Catholics opposed to it. It's been that way ever since. From the very beginning, Britain showed little understanding of Irish problems. The terrible famine of the 1840s proved it. 1 million people died of hunger and disease. Millions more emigrated. To Irishmen, the famine was mass murder. To Englishmen, it was an unfortunate consequence of free enterprise. By the end of the 19th century, Irish demands for a regional parliament, for home rule, could no longer be ignored. But for the Protestant minority, home rule meant Rome rule, a Catholic government led by priests. In the northern province of Ulster, the Protestant stronghold, there were huge demonstrations against it. In 1912, the Protestants began to arm and built an army of 100,000 trained men, the Ulster Volunteer Force. Its slogan, Ulster will fight and Ulster will be right. When the Protestants organized, so did 75,000 of the Catholics. Faced with mounting tension in Ireland and the outbreak of war in Europe, the English postponed Home Rule. But this time there were some Catholics who were not to be put off. Home Rule was no longer enough. Now they wanted full independence, their own Irish Republic. Easter 1916 was the spark. 1,600 Republicans barricaded themselves into the Dublin General Post Office and other selected buildings and held off the British Army for 7 days. At first, the rebellion attracted little support, but all that changed when the British executed 15 of the leaders and made them martyrs for the Republican cause. In 1919, the Republican political party, Sinn Féin, set up its own independent parliament with a guerrilla army to protect it. The Irish Republican Army, the IRA, was launched against the British Army for the first time. As a compromise, the British offered to partition the island north and south with 2 separate regional parliaments. The Protestant North accepted. The Catholic South did not and fought on. 1921, another compromise. The South was offered Dominion status like Australia or Canada. This was acceptable to most Irishmen, but not the IRA, who blew up the Dublin Courts of Justice. There was civil war. But within a year, the fighting was over. The South's connection with Britain was slowly severed altogether. In 1948, full independence was finally achieved. The price of independence was high. The island remained divided. The South became the Republic of Ireland, its capital in Dublin. The North remained British, dominated by Protestants, with the Catholics a minority deprived of political rights. By 1968, the Catholics in the North formed their own civil rights movement to force political change. The violence with which the Protestant police broke up the marches fostered the war mentality that still exists today. It splintered Ulster society into warring tribes. The British Army was called in to protect Catholics against the Protestant backlash, and the presence of British troops on Catholic streets was enough to awaken an enemy who had scarcely existed for 50 years, the IRA. Now, more determined than ever to unite Ireland, whatever the cost. Not to be outdone, the Protestant workers organized their own paramilitary units. The issue of civil rights was buried by the juggernaut of an urban guerrilla struggle. One horror story succeeded another. Catholics shot in Derry on Bloody Sunday. Protestants blown up in Belfast on Bloody Friday. By 1972, Northern Ireland was chaos. The British suspended Ulster's Parliament and imposed direct rule from London through a mediator, William Whitelaw. Whitelaw almost brought the two sides together. At Sunningdale in December 1973, an agreement was hammered out between Catholics and Protestants, with the Dublin government included. The Protestant workers, smelling a sellout, went on strike. Sunningdale collapsed. Now the British government has planned a constitutional convention for this spring, at which Protestants and Catholics in Northern Ireland must plan their own future. Since Ireland was divided in the 1920s, the Catholic South has pressed for reunification of the island. The Protestant North has resisted the idea. When Belfast in the north looks at Dublin in the south, it dislikes what it sees. A backward economy, a government dominated by the church, and a people ready to fight alongside the IRA to recapture the north. The republic we visited is none of that, though it's easy to see why the myths persist. To northern Protestants, the Catholic Church seems awesome, threatening, the relationship between church and state too intimate. When Bishop Eamon Casey was consecrated 5 years ago, it was virtually a state occasion. The Prime Minister at the time, Jack Lynch, was there. So was President Eamon de Valera. The Irish Republic, population 3 million, is 94% Catholic. There's a priest, brother, or nun for every 178 Irishmen. Northerners note that the church has been the loudest supporter of the state's laws forbidding divorce and contraception. But these days, the church no longer leads the electorate by the nose, but by the hand. Its political influence is waning, as Bishop Casey points out.
I'm here 5 years. I came here November 1969. I have never once in my 5 years tried to, in any way, influence the attitude of or the decision of any of the elected people of this class, and I wouldn't dream of doing it.
Could you, in good conscience, condone the use of contraceptives, of divorce, by people outside the faith?
I would feel that, with regard to the use of contraception and the use of divorce, I can't lay down laws and regulations for people who don't share my values. Within the values which I hold, and hold very deeply, certainly I could neither condone them nor accept them. But an individual must act according to the manner in which that person's conscience has been formed by his beliefs and by the tradition in which he has grown.
Would you object to a change in the law?
No, I mean, I wouldn't. That's for the people to make up their minds about. I won't. I didn't, and I won't.
And I think wouldn't you advise your parishioners to vote against?
Oh no, against the law on divorce. Personally, I wouldn't know. Again, I would not. This would be a matter for them to decide within their own values. I would not, as bishop, stand up and say, "Don't vote for this."
The Catholic Church frightens Northerners, but what worries them more is that in a united Ireland, their standard of living would fall. Today, British subsidies keep Northern Ireland afloat. To replace those subsidies, the Republic would have to raise taxes between 25 and 50%. But the standard of living in the South is gradually catching up with the North. Beside the lakes and mountains of Killarney, in the southwest corner of the Republic, we discovered further evidence of Irish prosperity. 32-year-old Jean Fogarty is dispatch manager for a crane factory on the outskirts of town. All over the Republic, Galway, Shannon, Cork, farms are giving way to factories. Like everywhere else, there's unemployment and inflation. But as a member of the European Common Market, the Republic's prospects for economic growth are excellent. The traditional dependence of Irish exports on England is at last below 50%. For the first time since the famine, emigration is declining, and the population is growing again.
A lot of my friends that left and immigrated, my school friends, they've come back now. They're working locally, lots of them. There's no place like Killarney if you want to do a bit of fishing or shooting, or hunting or sport, anything in that line, you know. Generally everything in that line is here, you know.
Would you like to see a united Ireland?
Well, if it didn't cost me anything, which is probably the wrong thing to say, but I don't think we'll see. I don't think I'll see it. I don't think I'll see it. I would like to see it. I would like to see united Ireland.
What price would you be prepared to pay?
Well, I don't think any one life is worth it. I don't think even one life is worth it. It's a shame, you know. Oh, I'd be prepared. I wouldn't be prepared if you're asking me would I be prepared to go up there and do my bit. I don't think I would.
Would you be prepared to pay higher taxes to incorporate Ulster into united Ireland?
I would, I think. I would indeed, yes.
Would you support the IRA?
I would not. I would not indeed.
Do you think people in the Republic are really prepared now to push for a united Ireland?
Yes, I would say they are. I would say they are, you know. I would say there are a lot of good Republicans, if that's the right word, good Republicans in the south of Ireland, you know, and they're pushing hard, you know, and they would fight for it as well, I'd say, you know.
There have always been Irishmen prepared to die for a united Ireland, but today many are unwilling to give up their new life for an old dream. It's not just complacency that's changed attitudes, but political maturity. The Republic today is a stable democracy. Its government, voted into office by people like the Fogartys, is convinced that reunification cannot be achieved by force. But when Northerners look south, what they see is the IRA and its supporters waiting to march north.
A Tale of Two Irelands with CBS News correspondent John Lawrence continues.
Everyone in Ireland recognizes that most Catholics want the island reunited. Protestant fears are understandable. But most Irishmen want this done peacefully, by political means, and with the North's consent. Only a minority, the IRA and its supporters, still wants to force the North into a united Ireland. In Dublin, we talked to representatives of both viewpoints. Garrett Fitzgerald is Foreign Minister of the Irish Republic. His government echoes moderate Catholic attitudes. On the outskirts of town, we met secretly with David O'Connell, the IRA Chief of Staff. Wanted by police on both sides of the border, O'Connell plans IRA strategy for the North from various hiding places in the South. On separate occasions, we asked both men about the prospects for a united Ireland and the struggle in the North.
What do you see as the essential priorities for a solution to the crisis there?
Well, the essential elements are that the two communities find a way of living and working together and joining together in governing that area. And unless you can get them to work together and get a measure of cooperation between the new regime, whatever it may be, of power sharing in the North and the Republic, it will be very hard to find a solution.
We are fighting to secure the withdrawal of British forces from Ireland. We accept that we have taken quite a hammering as such over the last number of years. But after all, this is war. We give as good as we get. And on our part, we will continue to fight until the British Army is gone.
But what about retaliatory killing in bombing civilian targets in Protestant neighborhoods?
We bomb what you term civilian targets. To us, we do not bomb pubs. There is an order against our units operating against pubs. If we find that pubs or a pub is frequented by RUC Special Branch British military, it is a legitimate target. But we have not carried out any bombing operation against a pub simply because it was a Protestant pub or located in a Protestant area.
Isn't it a fact that by shooting people in the knees, by tarring and feathering them, you're using a form of terrorism?
It's a form of punishment which is meted out to those who offend basically against our own organisation. Kneecapping is something which is more relevant to the IRA. We are a guerrilla army and we do have a very strict code of conduct. If that code is violated, then one is subject to punishment. As regards tarring and feathering, I personally would opt any day for tarring and feathering rather than going before the British court and get 15 years.
What do you hope to accomplish by bombing targets in England?
Everything is designed towards forcing the British government to make the declaration that they're leaving this country.
What do you think of the politicians, North and South?
Second to the British government, they have been responsible for the bloodshed which has taken place in this country. The Dublin politicians abdicated their responsibility to the people of Ireland. They claim to uphold a constitution which is supposed to run over the island of Ireland. They do nothing but collaborate with the British, and as such, in our view, they are next to the British as enemies.
The only election the Provisional IRA have ever dared to contest in this island, local elections here a few months ago, they got something like 4% of the votes in the constituencies in which they stood. 4 or 5%. And that's a measure of the degree of support which they have in this part of Ireland. In Northern Ireland, they haven't dared to present themselves at any election.
What about the possibility of civil war?
It is a possibility. If civil war is thrust upon us, we will fight it and win it.
Do you think for a moment that a phased withdrawal of the British Army, the British government from Northern Ireland would lead to anything but civil war?
I certainly do. I do not accept that it would lead inevitably to civil war. I believe that there is a far better chance that it would lead to an awakening, to the realization of a responsibility on the part of Republicans, Loyalists, Nationalists, Unionists, Catholic, Protestant, that a new era would begin, and that we will have to come together, and I think we will prove that we can come together to devise institutions of government.
If the British Army and British government withdrew from Northern Ireland without a solution, leaving a vacuum behind them, with the two communities at loggerheads with each other already, in those circumstances, I believe there would be a very grave danger of communal strife and civil war on a very large scale, and that is why we wish the British government and army to remain in Northern Ireland until a solution is found, and for as long afterwards as may be necessary, to reach the point where the people of Northern Ireland, by a majority, decide that they wish to join the Republic in a federal United Ireland.
A lot of people in America contribute money to various organizations that support the Republican movement here. Where does the money from America go?
Well, the money is collected purportedly to help the relatives of internees, people who are interned in Northern Ireland or in jail in Northern Ireland, and I'm sure that some of the money does go to that purpose. But I think there's ample evidence that from some, at least of these sources, some of the money goes to other purposes, to buy guns and explosives, to help the campaign in Northern Ireland.
Do you care where you get your weapons from?
We don't. If we can take them from the enemy, we take them. If we can buy them, we buy them. We beg, borrow, or steal to get weapons to fight the oppressor.
Do you care where you get your money from?
Not really. We need money, we will procure it by various means.
How long do you think it'll be before you have your United Ireland?
I would make no predictions. I'm past that stage. We work from day to day to bring to bear the greatest amount of pressure on the British government. We may crack them tomorrow. It may take 6 months. It may take 6 years. The overriding theme is we're going to end it, and we will end it this time, irrespective of the price that has to be paid. We do not want to see the next generation go through the concentration camps, have them brutalized by the British soldiers. We have the means, the ability, and the confidence to end it now, once and for all.
I hope that there will in time be United Ireland. I myself am half Northern Protestant, half Southern Catholic. It would be difficult for me not to feel this to be ultimately one country. But I recognise, as all of us do, that that unity can only come about with the consent of a majority in Northern Ireland, and that much would have to be done before that consent could validly be secured.
How long would it take?
Before this all started, many people thought, including many Northern Protestants, that Ireland could be politically reunited within 10 years. I think that few people would think that now, and indeed many would think that it would be decades beyond that. That's a measure of the damage the IRA have done to the cause they purport to serve.
With all the talk of truces and peaces and alliances, the weight of violent history still seems more powerful than the temporary ceasefire that has been patched together. So long as there are armed extremists, Catholic and Protestant, civil war could break out, regardless of what the political leaders of the IRA or the UDA or the British government say. Civil war, if it comes, will erupt spontaneously. We watched it almost happen one day on a street corner in Belfast.
Watch the gunmen, don't worry about the people around up down there. Watch the rooftops, watch the windows.
Wednesday morning, soldiers of the Gloucestershire Regiment cordon off the Catholic New Lodge section after a foot patrol comes under sniper attack. Patrols circle the area, but the sniper is gone. Residents watch the soldiers with growing resentment. The women jeer as the patrol moves out of sight. Across the street, a few Protestants are spotted, and both groups trade insults, gestures, and bottles. A mile away at Clonard Street and the Falls Road, a hijacked truck is set on fire. An army jeep investigates, to a hail of bricks and bottles. Another armored car passes, but doesn't stop. It could be a setup, with a rooftop sniper waiting his chance to pick off a careless soldier. The troops remain under cover, firing warning shots with rubber bullets. When the mood in the city is angry enough, all restraints quickly vanish. It's always the children who notice first. Today, anything goes. A chain reaction is developing. The army continues to circle the Clonard perimeter, trying to discourage a crowd buildup, accidentally trapping a civilian driver in a kind of armor-plated sandwich. "3 o'clock, school's out. The tribe gathers. It's playtime. Farther down the Falls Road, a driver leaves his refrigerated truck unattended. An expensive mistake. A second street is blocked. Another insurance claim to be filed. Kids in Belfast get bored quickly. They don't seem to be enjoying themselves, these 13-year-olds going on 30, with manic smiles. Suddenly, the tempo accelerates. An IRA sniper, shielded by the crowd, opens up on the troops. A soldier scatters the kids with a rubber bullet, and the army advances in strength. A Saracen armored car plows into the barricade. Like a beached whale, the Saracen snags itself on the barricades. Passers-by pay no attention. They've seen it all before. Time to go home. As the junction is cleared, the main body of troops advances in the direction of the lone sniper, fanning out through the side streets to track him down.
Every one of these. Okay. Section back onto the road when you've done it. Make a list of those you've done. Well, that's all buttoned up.
The standard IRA tactic is for the gunman to slip into a friendly home, ditch the gun, and duck out the back door and away. The army hopes he hasn't had the time to get clear and may still be inside one of the houses. Known sympathizers and suspects are searched.
Leave him alone! Leave him alone!
The crowd doesn't like it. No weapons are found. Back on Clonard Street, the troops make a snatch. A suspect is locked in the armored car. He is not the gunman. The crowd is furious and demands his release. The army ignores them. On the corner, the action slows. It's getting late, 4:30. The small boy who burned the first truck is finally bored with the game and decides to go home for tea to watch the rerun on television. No one was killed. The violence was contained within tribal compounds. No sectarian lines were crossed this time. British Secretary Merlin Rees explains why.
Without the presence of the British Army, there would be a doomsday situation here. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Protestant working class involved in paramilitary forces and the Catholic working class involved in their paramilitary forces, they would meet and there would be, in inverted commas, a doomsday situation. Indeed, some people, but they're always a long way away from here, say, let it happen as the only bloodletting that will get us through the sort of the valley of the shadow out the other side where one can move on to progress. No. I tell you what I think is the only way through. And I don't even mean in the short run. I'm not naive enough to believe that 800 years of Irish history can be exorcised, overnight. It is this. We are going to run a convention. There will be elections for the Irish themselves.
The British government hopes that the political convention this spring will not be deadlocked by Protestant hardliners. If it is, the Catholics will probably conclude that the IRA was right all along, that there can be no political justice for Catholics in Northern Ireland. At that stage, the British government might well wash its hands of Northern Ireland altogether and pull out the troops. and that might lead to the civil war everyone fears. But if the moderates on all sides can succeed in persuading enough voters that gradual political change is to everyone's advantage, then maybe the tale of two Irelands will have a happy ending. Both Irelands have a special appeal, their people a particular charm. But their land has a history and its people a capacity for vengeance and violence that outsiders cannot comprehend. Perhaps it is because of the past, the centuries of conflict, the religious and tribal intrigue, the slogans and songs, the prayers and poems passed down through the generations for 400 years, that Ireland is still divided. For centuries, Ireland has adapted to war. It is centuries overdue for peace. This is John Lawrence. Good night.
A Tale of Two Irelands will continue.
Just live my life.
Since this broadcast was filmed, Woodvale's leading baritone was arrested by the British Army for his involvement in sectarian violence. He is currently interned at Longkesh Prison. His commander, Sammy McCracken, was also interned for 2.5 months, but was released. Since then, Sammy has seemed reluctant to reassume his old role as commander of the WDA. Des Reynolds remains unemployed, but is training to be a professional heavyweight boxer. David O'Connell, prime architect of the current IRA truce, is still at large somewhere in the Irish Republic.
Come all young rebels, and list while I sing. For the love of one's country is a beautiful thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of the patriot game.